Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TF1 show. Now, today, I see Formula Podcast 1. Will is asking me who's going to be today's mystery guest, and I am going to disappoint you a lot because today you are, for the first time in quite a while, unfortunately, only going to have to look at my ugly mug for the remainder of this episode, but I'm going to try and make it as exciting as possible. I think we can definitely say the British Grand Prix, and I guess that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to recap the British Grand Prix, and it was a bit of a snooze. I'm not going to lie. For the first 50 laps, it was pretty boring, and then all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. I mean, my heart rate is still, I think, at about 120 beats per minute after that finish, especially with Crofty on Sky Sports not even really knowing which Mercedes we were looking at and which Mercedes tire was blowing up. But I'm going to also try and sneak in as many tire puns as possible throughout this race recap. So look out for those. So let's get into it. Let's chat about the race and I guess the entire weekend. And as per usual, we will be talking about it from the team's perspective. So we'll be going down the teams in position order or in the position that they finished. So let's talk about Mercedes. I actually don't want to talk too much about them from a performance perspective, just because we've basically said anything or everything. They are more than a second ahead of the next best team in qualifying. They are a complete class above, completely separated from the rest. It's going to be a Mercedes championship, but we've been saying this now for weeks. And with the race results today, it's probably going to be Hamilton more likely than not. But I think we can say Valtteri Bottas's championship chances deflated along with his tires. And, I feel bad for Valtteri, right? I was actually quite impressed with him during the race. He pushed Hamilton quite hard throughout because we all know how strong Hamilton's race pace is. Especially last year, he comprehensively defeated Valtteri over the race distance. And today, Valtteri was on his case the whole time, like literally from lap 1 to the end. He was less than 1.5, maybe sometimes even less than 1 second behind Hamilton throughout. So it's actually quite a strong race performance from Bottas. And I think, and Hamilton sort of alluded to it in his post-race interview, maybe Bottas pushed a bit too hard on his tires. And that also resulted in Hamilton having to push quite hard because then obviously his tire disintegrated 3 laps before the end of the race, which just threw everything into disarray. So it's a really, really gutting one for Bottas. For Hamilton, I mean, like how ridiculous. I mean, having to limp across the line with half a lap to go, with Verstappen catching up at an alarming rate. That was one of the most bizarre finishes to a race that I've ever seen. I don't think I've seen a more dramatic ending, maybe other than Brazil 2008 when Hamilton overtook Glock on the last corner. But yeah, it was a crazy finish to the race for both Mercedes cars. I think Toto Wolff is probably going to have to go into therapy for the next couple of days before he can come back and reassess what they're going to do for next weekend. But I think overall for Mercedes, we just need to say a job well done. They are by far and away the class of the field. And actually, while we're talking about them and before we move on, I just want to tell everybody that's angry at Mercedes for doing well or for making the championship uninteresting, they can go jump. And I've said this a couple of times before on this podcast, but you can't blame Mercedes for doing their job well. We need to blame Ferrari and we need to blame Red Bull, who managed to literally go backwards compared to their cars from last year. If you can go look at the times, both Ferrari and Red Bull actually lost time compared to their previous year's efforts. And if you think that's acceptable in a sport that's half about the drivers and half about engineering, then you need to take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror, because people need to stop being angry at Mercedes for doing well, because they're the only team that seems to be doing this properly. And yeah, I guess that's my rant for the day. So let's move on to Red Bull. Now, let's maybe come out and say, first and foremost, they definitely did a better job this weekend compared to in Hungary, because Hungary was pretty bad. Like, that was poor from Red Bull, I think, even relative to the other teams. Red Bull looked relatively strong. The car seemed a lot more sorted compared to Hungary. Max Verstappen, a good performance. I think he did as well as he could have, to be honest. He did a decent enough lap in qualifying. He sort of tried to keep pace with the leaders in the opening phases of the race. But then Max Verstappen tried. He gets a gold star for effort, I think, almost winning the race at the end with the whole tire blow up. But the Red Bull couldn't have asked for more. So let's rather leave Red Bull and Max alone and talk about one of the more pressing topics after the weekend, and that is Alex Albon. Now, I want to firstly just again pick a bone with Will from Formula Podcast One. Now, he has been on this podcast a while back on the first race review, and he is just giving me anxiety with the videos that he's putting out. I'll link his video at the end of this episode as well, so you can go watch it. But he does ask a very pertinent question, and that is, should Alex Albon drive for Red Bull for the remainder of the year? And I'm going to answer a comprehensive yes. He should still drive for Red Bull at the end of the year due to a couple of reasons that are set out nicely for Will from Formula Podcast One to internalize and maybe to look in the mirror and self-reflect on the things that he's speaking into the world. So firstly, Alex Albon has a problem with qualifying. I mean, it's as clear as day to see. It's similar, I guess, to what we saw with Gasly last year, but Alex is actually able to make races happen. Obviously not to the extent that Max is able to, but he is still banking the points that Red Bull wants him to bank, despite having a bit of a struggle in qualifying. And he does actually seem to make decent progress through the pack, although this race was a bit of a struggle. I'm not going to lie, the opening stint was hard. I think, obviously the impact with Magnussen caused a bit of trouble, and then he had to take the early pit stop. And then with the safety car, he got screwed over because then everybody else basically got a free pit stop, which meant that he was a bit of a struggle bus, I think, for the majority of the race. But when he did pit for the second time and put on the mediums, he was actually showing really, really good pace. And I was very positive about the speed that he was showing, lapping faster than Max, consistently, obviously with the tire advantage, but still, very much on par with the leaders. And I think that is, again, green shoots of hope for Alex. I really hope that he can build on this. I think that's what I would say my first reason for why Red Bull shouldn't drop him. And then the second reason is Red Bull isn't going to win the championship this year. I think we can now, take that to the bank. Red Bull isn't going to fight for the drivers or the constructors this year, which means they can actually give Alex the opportunity and take the pressure off and just give him a chance to breathe and for him to just bed down in that car and to really to start and understand and get comfortable. Because I think, and this has now also been said quite often, that Red Bull is not an easy car to drive. And Max obviously is a very talented driver, and I think his driving style does allow him to drive around some of the car's problems, where Alex is still 1.5 years in F1. So he's obviously not going to necessarily find those solutions from the get-go in a car that is as what's the best way to describe it, as unpredictable as the Red Bull. So we need to give Alex a chance. And I think Red Bull also recognizes that they need to give Alex a chance, because I was actually pleasantly surprised. And I mean, although not that it's difficult to be surprised by anything that Red Bull does, because I mean, Red Bull is more unpredictable than their car's rear end. But they have come out in Albon's defense quite staunchly, I thought, over this weekend. Both Horner and Helmut Marko actually, came to Albon's defense and really said, listen, they also put up their hands and realize that to give somebody a car like they've given Alex with his amount of experience is always going to be challenging. And they also need to put up their hand and realize that it's partly Alex's fault. And I think he recognizes that too. But Red Bull also needs to make it as easy as possible for him so that they can build that team and move forward. So I guess that's the last little piece that I want to say on Alex Albon. I really do hope they'll retain him. I think they will retain him at least to the end of the year. And to be honest, given the options available to them for next year, I wouldn't be surprised if they keep him for next year too, given that he is still scoring the good points for them during the races. But yeah, I really hope Alex, I'm sending you virtual hugs if you watch this. Go and reflect, go and be better. I know you can be better, Alex. So I really hope that things go better for you next week in Silverstone. Okay, now let's talk about our favorite struggle bus, Ferrari. Now, let's give Charles Leclerc the props that he deserves this weekend. He dragged that car to a very, very good qualifying position. I thought Ferrari was going to be like way back. I was thinking to myself, if they get a point, they're gonna have to be excited. But Charles, and I think they were actually quite clever in taking off a lot of the downforce of that car and trying to reduce drag as much as possible. I think it did hurt them in the race to an extent, but I mean, Charles put in a really, really good lap to get to P4, to start P4 in qualifying, and then also really held steady in the race. For a second, I thought he was going to get under pressure from, Sainz and Ricciardo and the McLaren and the Renault behind, because they were slightly faster than him during the second half of the race. He got saved. I have to say, Charles can send Romain Grosjean a gift basket, maybe, some ingredients for his next cookbook. You can send Grosjean a thank you letter, because Grosjean's car parking himself between Charles and Carlos after that pit stop really helped him. I think that allowed Charles to build a bit of a gap between the two of them while Carlos and Lando and Daniel were trying to get past Romain. So, but overall, I mean, he got a podium, a bit of a fortunate one, similar to the last one, but he got a podium. He put his car in the right place at the right time, and, good for you, Charles Leclerc. Yeah, that's all I can say. And let's now move to our old Sebastian. Now Sebastian Vettel, I think we can openly say, did not have a very nice British Grand Prix. I mean, we was going downhill from the Friday practice, where something was loose on his pedals. He couldn't get the car to work. Every time the camera cut to Sebastian, he was locking up into some corner, or he was running wide, or he was kicking up dust. That car didn't seem under him at all, not at any point during the weekend. And that basically borne out in the results that we saw. We saw him struggle to keep pace with Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri. He couldn't really defend from Esteban Ocon. I mean, he overtook Ocon during the pit stop phase, and Ocon basically overtook him at the next available opportunity. So this is actually, I would say, quite alarming for Sebastian and Ferrari. Because yes, Charles is doing a good job, but Ferrari need two cars up there. They can't operate with just one car, where, especially in the midfield as tight as what it is at the moment. I mean, we saw how incredibly close that DRS train was with the McLarens and the Renaults and the Ferrari and the Racing Point, all of them basically running at the same speed. So you need a second car in that train if you want to optimize strategy and if you want to leave your options as open as possible. So I am very worried for Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari. And Ferrari needs to sort out Vettel's car, because it's clear as day that setup, or the way that car is working, is not to Vettel's liking. Seems like Leclerc, similar to Verstappen, can drive around the issue a bit more. He can sort of hustle the car around the corner, where Vettel needs that car to be stable and planted. So it's going to be tough, guys. It's going to be tough. But I really hope Vettel can switch it on, because at the end of the day, right, I mean, Leclerc had a pretty shocker of a race last weekend in Hungary. So it's not like Vettel is miles off Leclerc consistently. It was very much a Silverstone problem, it seems. And hopefully they can analyze the data in the coming week. Vettel is, we know how good he is at analyzing and understanding. So let's see if he can maybe turn around his fortunes for next week, Saturday. Cool. Now let's talk about the remainder of the midfield, and maybe let's like midfield class A, and that would be for McLaren, Renault, and Racing Point. Now this was probably my favorite part of the race, the battle between all of these drivers. Like Liam Talks F1 said, I see he just commented, and he says it's going to be a battle for fourth like in 2014. Absolutely. I mean, those cars were running line astern for 20-25 laps, literally all within DRS range, pushing on. It was actually really, really cool to see. And I think Silverstone is a bit of a difficult track to overtake on if the cars have, similar pace. And those cars were literally lapping within a tenth of each other consistently. And that's now Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Sebastian, well, no, not Vettel. I mean, Vettel, let's not talk about Vettel. Esteban Ocon, all of them were literally lapping similar speed throughout. So that was actually really fascinating to see. I'm absolutely gutted for Carlos Sainz. I mean, is he the best guy on an opening lap? I would say he's probably the best guy on an opening lap now out of the entire field. Like literally every single race, he finds himself ahead of Lando at the end of the first lap. Like Lando it's sort of been the tendency for Lando to out-qualify him recently. And then in the race, when you see him again, Carlos is running P5 or P4, and then he's leapfrogged 2 or 3 cars just in that opening phase of the Grand Prix. And that is such a good skill to have. And I think Carlos needs appreciation for that, because he was running in P5 consistently throughout the entire race, really managing things well. And for his tires to blow up 2 laps before the end it's just, I don't think you get much more gutting than that. And he did look very sad in the post-race interview that he was doing with Lando. I think he realized that was a big opportunity, and that could have been a big, how can I call it? A big statement from him during the race. But I guess he'll go and analyze and realize that actually out of the midfield, probably him and Daniel Ricciardo did the best job, I would argue. So Carlos, good job. Sorry about the race, but you deserve a lot of compliments for how you did. So yes, Beth, I agree, that is straight facts. Let's quickly talk about Lando. Solid race from Lando. Great qualifying performance by Lando. I thought him and Leclair were my stars of Saturday, obviously along with Lewis with pole position. But I have to say Lando on the Saturday was really strong. On the Sunday, he still has some things to work on. I think Carlos is still the stronger one, especially with the sort of racecraft side of things. I mean, Carlos just always seems to place his car a bit better, especially in sort of the opening skirmishes where there's lots going on with a lot of the other cars around them. Carlos seems to be a bit more definitive and a bit more decisive in the way he races. But Lando sorted himself out quite quickly, got back behind Carlos and basically was lapping similar pace to him for the remainder of the race. Got overtaken by Ricciardo right at the end. I agree, Will, from Formula Podcast 1, Lando has always found it quite hard to defend. I think Ricciardo was running incredibly quickly at the end. I think that Renault, and it sort of makes me happy to see as well, but that Renault was really, really running well at the end. Both Ocon and Ricciardo were going super quickly. I think they were the only cars that were fast, that were going faster than Ricciardo and Ocon was Verstappen and the 2 Mercedes. Oh, and obviously Albon on the medium tires, but they were going faster than Leclerc, faster than the McLarens. So Ricciardo getting past Lando at the end, a very positive performance, I thought, by Daniel. I would argue he's probably my driver of the day. It was a bit of a weird day. It's sort of hard to really pinpoint a driver that shone during the race, but I'd probably give it to Daniel. I think Daniel drove a very consistent, very fast race. His tires seem to be in good condition at the end. So both him and Ocon, really good performances. I think this is a very positive step for Renault. And they're going to be very dangerous, I think, next week in Silverstone. Now that they also understand their car a bit better, they brought upgrades this weekend as well. So they're going to now understand the upgrades a bit better too. So look out for Renault. If they can qualify a bit higher up, maybe out-qualify a McLaren or 2 McLarens or a Ferrari, they can actually really push Red Bull. Maybe not. It's going to be tough. Just as an aside, I thought it was quite hilarious how, Mercedes was about 0.5 tenth to 7.5 tenths faster over one lap compared to Red Bull today. And then Verstappen was more than a second faster than Leclerc's Ferrari. So that was shocking to me as well. Like even the difference between the Red Bull and the other teams was quite big. So, I mean, that would have probably hurt Ferrari a bit as well. But anyways, let's quickly touch on racing points. Now, can we just give F's in the chat for Nico Hulkenberg? After all that admin of flying in on the Friday, getting his seat fit in the city till the wee hours of the morning, borrowing a racing suit from Lance Stroll, getting in the car, hurting his neck, going through the most to just sort of get up to speed, almost matching Stroll in qualifying and then not being able to start the race. I mean, that's just the biggest anticlimax since I can't even remember a bigger anticlimax since the French Grand Prix 2019, I would say, because I feel bad for Nico. Sounds like at least he's going to get another chance next week, given that the FIA has instated a mandatory 10-day quarantine period for anyone that tests positive. So Sergio Perez is not going to be able to race next weekend by the sound of things. So I really hope Nico can bounce back. And now that he sort of has a feel for the car, maybe get to a bit of a stronger start on the Friday already, so they can really be more better prepared for qualifying and then for the race. So, yes, I guess the French GP was always going to be rubbish. But I mean, actually, this whole race was a bit of an anticlimax right up until the end, because, I mean, it was slow going for a stage. All we had was Esteban Ocon sort of sticking his nose out, trying to overtake Lance Stroll there for a bit. But Lance Stroll, he did okay. I have to say, I was a bit disappointed with the Racing Point's pace today. I thought, given that they are basically modeled off last year's Mercedes that was so strong here last year, that they were going to be up there challenging the Red Bulls. But alas, wasn't to be. Lance Stroll finishing, I guess, behind the Renaults, behind the McLarens. And I think he lost out to Gasly in the AlphaTauri as well. But BMPH F1 comments, RP was surprisingly slow today. Thought Stroll would be up there with Verstappen. That makes two of us, Ben. So Stroll was struggling. I don't know if Nico would have been able to do better. I guess we'll never know. We'll probably see next week if Racing Point can figure out what was happening there. But Stroll, not a very strong race. So I think they're going to leave this weekend feeling pretty disappointed. Poor Racing Point. Alrighty, so let's talk about the last couple of teams. So this is now midfield class B, and that is AlphaTauri, Haas, Williams, and Alfa Romeo. I'm going to go through them quickly because, to be honest, there's not that much to say. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly is really rebounding well from last year's disappointment. I have to give him props for that. Whether that's going to result in a Red Bull seat, maybe, but I'm not too confident in that. I think we've already seen with Kvyat, I mean, once you had your chance and you blow it, chances of you going back is probably not going to be that great. Again, whether Gasly is going to fare any better than Alex, I'm also not sure, because it does seem like it's a Red Bull specific problem where that car is maybe not as easy to drive for somebody that isn't named Max Verstappen. But all in all, a strong performance by Pierre Gasly, challenging Vettel throughout the race, being, in the points for the majority of the race as well. So we can only give him props. Then Danny Kvyat, shame. I felt bad for the guy. He sounded devastated on the radio, even after a massive accident. He was immediately apologizing. Not really sure what caused it, but to be honest, it's not like he was lighting it up anyways. He was struggling throughout, even in qualifying in the race. He really wasn't doing that well. Haas, now look, Romain Grosjean, he again got up to many mischiefs from Romain Grosjean. But when last was Romain relevant in a race? I mean, he was there mixing it with the big boys, causing mayhem, getting black and white flags. Romain Grosjean was living it up in the midfield, I thought, there for a while. Now, obviously, his moves were a bit on the fence. I think the one on Daniel Ricciardo especially was a bit close. I think maybe if you didn't have an experienced driver like Daniel on the other side, there could have been a bit of an accident. But Roman, he did his utmost. He tried. He was the little engine that could, I think, for this race. I mean, he held out on Carlos for quite a while, but then I guess when he had to pit, faded quite quickly. So let's give Roman that little stamp of approval, because I think he deserves it. Kevin Magnussen obviously had his accident with Alex Albon. Now, he actually had a very good start. I think he started from 15th or 16th, and he was up running in 12th. After the first couple of laps, he made a mistake in the chicane, and then Alex saw an opportunity, couldn't get out of it quickly enough, and Bob's your uncle, Kevin, out of the race. So, yeah, pity for Kevin, but he did make a mistake, to be honest. So, Albon did get the penalty. I was sort of on the fence about whether Albon should be getting a penalty personally, but I guess whatever, we move on, we live, we learn. Then I quickly want to talk about Williams, and we need to again give George Russell a big round of applause for making it out of Q3 for the third race in a row. That guy is quality. He makes my heart happy. I just want to see him in a Mercedes. Please, Toto Wolff, make it happen, please. We want Russell in the Mercedes next to Hamilton. Hamilton can teach George everything he knows, and then he can go and retire after his 8th championship, and George will continue the powerful and magnificent legacy of the Mercedes team. So, Toto, if you're listening to me, and I'm pretty sure you are, given the status of this podcast, please give George Russell an opportunity sooner rather than later. Now, obviously, in the race for Williams, it was tough going. Still have race pace problems. George did the best he could. He also got the penalty for the yellow flag infringement during qualifying, but he still came home in 12th. So, again, a strong performance by George despite all of his difficulties. Nicholas Latifi, he just needs to get up to speed still. I think the gap between him and George is quite big, embarrassingly so. I think, the next to Verstappen and Albon, the biggest discrepancy between the two is currently between Russell and Latifi. So I hope Nicholas can figure things out. Hopefully he, with more experience and more time, he can get into the swing of things a bit more. So yeah, holding thumbs for Nicholas, but at the moment it's a bit of a struggle. And talking about struggle, let's just talk about Alfa Romeo and just say it was a struggle. There's not much more I can say. Kimi Räikkönen, I think, is on a drive into the sunset. I don't think it's going to continue next year, and sort of rumors indicate that as well. Alfa Romeo seems to be very much on the downward spiral, struggling for pace on a Saturday and a Sunday. I hope they can improve because we need that team in F1. So yeah, that's all I can really say about Alfa Romeo, and hopefully it goes better next race. Okay, everyone. So that is all of my thoughts on the teams for this weekend. And I guess that then means we can move on to the illustrious, the fantastical TF1 awards. And as per usual, I have 3 awards that I would like to hand out to a driver or a team that fulfilled the criteria of the specific award. Now, the first one is called the Pastor Maldonado Award for Most Dunderheaded Deed. And I would like to give that to Romain Grosjean for his moves on Sainz and Ricciardo. And Romain, I think you just take this award and run with it, because this is probably the first and the last Formula One award that you're going to be receiving in the foreseeable future. Secondly, the Lewis Hamilton #Blessed Award for Luckiest Driver, I think, has to go to its namesake, to Lewis Hamilton, for having a tire blowout on the last lap, but still having enough of a buffer over Red Bull to actually scrape that car across the finish line, despite Verstappen closing in at an alarming rate. And lastly, I would like to give the Nico Hülkenberg Podium Award for Unluckiest Driver, and this to me is a 3-way tie between Nico Hülkenberg, Valtteri Bottas and Carlos Sainz. Now, obviously, Nico Hülkenberg for basically uprooting his entire existence, coming to Singapore, to Silverstone, and not being able to start the race. I thought that's just, quite a big waste of time and effort. But luckily for him, he can still race next week. My second one is Valtteri Bottas and Carlos Sainz, and that's just because, having your tire blow up 2 laps before the end of the race after putting in a very strong race performance is never a good feeling. And really, especially for Carlos, maybe, who seemed to really be, he's been unlucky over the last couple of races with his pit stops. It's a bit of a hammer blow, but I know that they'll bounce back. Valtteri is probably going to be a bit of a Debbie Downer, because I think he realizes that, Hamilton getting 25 points versus 0 for him in a season as short as this is probably going to mean bad things for his championship hopes. But yeah, that's I guess racing, and you can't really do anything about it. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the TF1 show for today. I guess as is the case with the strange season, we have another race coming next week in Silverstone again. There's going to be softer compound tires. So that's going to be very interesting to see. We're probably going to see a lot more 2-stop races. I do hope that, the pit stops throw a bit of a spanner in the works, and especially in that midfield, it might make things very interesting. So we are left with quite a lot of questions going into next week's race. We need to ask ourselves whether Alex will remain at Red Bull Racing for the rest of the season. I will link in Will Ill's video on that in the description as well. So, he goes and takes a stab at answering that question. We also need to ask ourselves what will happen with the tires next week. Is it going to be chaos? It's probably going to be chaos if you saw what happened today. Although it's just going to be lots of tire saving, I'm going to guess. I mean, Mercedes is so much speed in reserve. I think they're just going to try and keep pace with Verstappen and protect their tires. And then lastly, will Nico Hülkenberg be able to bounce back? I mean, me and the guys on the Formula One content creators group, we've been manifesting a Nico Hülkenberg podium. I will continue to do so for the remainder of this week. I mean, we can make it happen, Nico. You can make it happen. Do it for us. Do it for us that have supported you through all of this, Nico. You deserve it. We deserve it. And I think that's probably the best note to end this episode on. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much to the guys that commented during this episode. Really appreciate it. For those listening on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, or on your podcast platform of choice, as always, thank you so much for listening. Really, really appreciate, you subscribing and listening to my podcast. Please also leave a comment or a little subscription if you so please. If you like my chaotic style of race review, I really appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward to the race next weekend. I guess you can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at TF1 Show on Twitter, where I talk a lot of nonsense. So please go and give me a follow there if you like reading nonsense. And every now and again, I say something sensible. But in any case, I'll chat to you all next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Cheers.